Hey guys, we are here to talk about some very interesting things today. I'm excited. Dwight is going to be educating on the power of the jury, and some other surrounding subjects and things that are extremely important for us to know as people of society. So just getting right into it, Dwight, what is the jury?
Well, the jury is a group of people that has existed in the English tradition since 1214. That's when the people of England got trial by jury at Magna Carta. And the jury makes the decision of guilt or innocence when someone is prosecuted criminally. Now, there's another jury, the civil trial jury, which is different from the criminal trial jury. The criminal trial jury has to agree unanimously for there to be a verdict. If it's a split decision, it's called a mistrial. The prosecutor has a choice. He can try it again. For my purposes, a mistrial, a split verdict, is a victory for the people that are seeking to get jury nullifications adapted and used widely by juries in America. We believe that the jury was used as far back as 1000 AD in Iceland. Now, that's maybe too deep in the weeds. Just forget about that for now.
Okay. So what are the rights and powers of the jury?
The purpose of the jury in our system is to harness the conscience and common sense of the jury as a check and balance on the legislators, on the legislators, and the bureaucrats, and executive branch people like governors and presidents. The purpose of the jury is to, from my purposes, the most important purpose of the jury, it's to get the verdict right, but it's also to protect the people from abuse of power by bureaucrats and even mistakes and errors by legislators. A prime example is the prohibition of alcohol in the 1920s. A lot of people in America thought that was a great idea, and it was jury nullifications that finally ended the prosecution of people making and selling alcohol, for example. I'm not a big user of alcohol. I'm a non-user of alcohol, but prohibition of alcohol was a disaster for America. It was called the noble failure. And jury nullifications got us out of that. It ended it. It was not the legislatures in the states who woke up and go, hey, this is a dumb idea. What happened is that prosecutors couldn't convict people. Less and less and less people got convicted. And so finally they threw in the towel and they stopped prosecuting. And eventually prohibition was repealed. But it was killed first by jury verdicts of not guilty or hung juries.
So on that note, what is jury nullification? This is the bread and butter right now.
Right. What a jury nullification is when the jury votes unanimously not guilty. That's what a jury nullification is. And the reason in their heart that they do that is not because they believe that the defendant didn't do it. They know that the defendant did the deed. That is illegal. The jury believes that the law itself is wrong. The law is immoral. The law is stupid. It is insane. For any reason like those or other similar reasons, that's called a jury nullification. Juries to compare and contrast. There's a lot of misinformation out about jury nullification. Jury nullification is a concept that is extremely threatening to the lawyer class, to judges, to prosecutors. It's not so much threatening to defense attorneys. They love it. But they can't talk about it, or the judge would put them in jail. What would they put them in jail for? For contempt of court, because the judge would warn them one time and say, you cannot say that, Mr. Mr. Defense Attorney. And if he does it, the judge can summarily put a lawyer in jail right on the spot. Not that they do that. Lawyers don't like to push them that far because it's bad for their career down the road.
So can you help us differentiate between what it used to be like with jury nullification, what's going on now? Like, why is this a concern?
Okay. The power of the jury has always been unpopular with judges all the way back to the 1200s. Judges have always been jealous of the power of the jury. In the courtroom, most people think that the judge is the top dog in the room. He is, in fact, not the top dog. The senior agency in that room is the jury. And judges have always been jealous. Let's say bad judges, narcissistic judges, power-hungry judges didn't like it. So it has been a problem for centuries, actually, judges trying to suppress the jury voting not guilty when the law itself is unpopular. Not because the defendant didn't do the deed that was against the law. So over the centuries, the suppression of jury nullification, the suppression of the juries voting their conscience and common sense has intensified. It intensified during several periods in American history. One of those periods was just before the Civil War. There were a class of laws called the Fugitive Slave Laws. Now, what I'm going into now is called the history of jury nullification. And all of this and more will be listed on the internet. You'll search for it, History of Jury Nullification. And the Fugitive Slave Laws were a deal that was cut between the northern states and the southern states. The Fugitive Slave Laws were passed, and it said if a runaway African slave goes across the Mason-Dixon line and into the northern states, he's still a fugitive. He can still be prosecuted in Ohio, in Iowa, in Michigan. And back in those days, they would prosecute. No, wait a minute, excuse me. The slave was not prosecuted. Anybody that sheltered the slave in his home or helped him or aided him in any way, that person would be prosecuted. So under the Fugitive Slave Laws, free white or black northerners were prosecuted as felons for aiding a runaway black slave. Again, it was called the Fugitive Slave Laws. And juries in the North would not convict. At least they wouldn't convict at a high enough percentage rate to satisfy prosecutors. So jury nullifications killed the Fugitive Slave Laws. And then along about 1860, something comes along called the Civil War, which changed the situation. And during the Civil War, slavery ended. But even before slavery ended, there were people who were resisting slavery, and some of them sat in jury boxes and said not guilty when their neighbors would not prosecute or would not convict the person who had broken this law. So fugitive slave laws were a period of time where judges began to lie to jurors and try to force them, intimidate them into violating their conscience and convicting anyway. These judges could be said to be being most charitable to them. These judges could be said they were trying to protect the Union from breaking up into a civil war, which ultimately happened. They were trying to protect or prevent the southern states from feeling like they had to break away into a separate country. So the Fugitive Slave Laws were a period of time where the judges got a taste of trampling on the jury's rights and powers to vote their conscience no matter what. The jury has the right and the power to vote their conscience no matter what the judge tells them, no matter what the judge says. The jury has the right to do that. And John Adams, our second president, said that this is not just in reference to the fugitive slave laws, because he was before the fugitive slave laws, any bad law. John Adams said that the jury has the duty to vote their conscience, no matter what. And I agree with John Adams. Mm-hmm. They have the right, the power, and the duty to vote their conscience. You, on a jury, you have the right, the power, and the duty to vote your conscience no matter what. Now, I did not say vote your prejudice. I did not say vote your airhead, uninformed ideas. I said vote your seriously heartfelt consideration of the issue. And you feel like the law itself is immoral. The law itself is destructive to the country. The law itself is destroying freedom and liberty. Then you have the right, the power, and the duty to vote not guilty, even when the defendant broke the law. And when all 12 or all 6 of the people on the jury agree, that's called a jury nullification.
Now, I know you started scratching the surface on this. Can you explain why you feel the rights, the powers, and jury nullification is confusing to understand? Why is that happening?
Well, actually, it's very simple to understand. There's going to be a but here in a minute, because it is confusing, and there's a reason. Jury nullification is easy to understand. Juries exist because people have common sense and they have conscience. And sometimes politicians and bureaucrats and cops and prosecutors, as we know today more than any other time, are immoral people. They sell out their conscience and common sense. They sell out because they're bribed by a foreign power like Red China. Or they sell out because they want to get along with the Speaker of the House, wherever they are, whether it's in the National Congress or whether it's in the Idaho House of Representatives. They sell out. And the people, because we are not in the government, except when we're on jury duty, we come in relatively pure and innocent. And that is what the people, the noblemen in 1214 saw, that we have to have the people sign off on whether or not this is really a law or not. And if the jury doesn't like a law, very quickly it could be not a law anymore. Because prosecutors and judges, they don't like to get jury nullified. It is a very unpleasant experience for them, emotionally, psychologically. And they don't want none of it anymore. And they don't have to experience a jury nullification. They can be watching one happening afar. Now, the reason that it is confusing, to answer your question, the reason it's confusing is because judges and lawyers lie about it. They tell the public lies. They tell the jury lies. Judges are actually guilty of several felonies. And I don't even need to add, in my opinion, to protect myself from a lawsuit. They are guilty of jury tampering, juror intimidation, racketeering, conspiracy. They're guilty of obstruction of justice. And they're guilty of probably some other crimes that I don't even understand, because I'm not a prosecutor. And I don't really understand, how we can get sideways to a law. How do they get away with that? They get away with it because the judges are the godfathers of the legal system. It's like a mafia, and the judges are the godfather.
So
on the other,
sure.
On the other side, there's also confusion coming from our side. There's confusion coming from my friends and probably your friends. As a matter of fact, you may be one of those people that believes things that are wrong. There is misinformation out there about what jury nullification is and what it can do, and what the power of the jury is and what it isn't. And many, I'm just going to call them, I'm going to tell you what I've called them for a long time: the cynical, depressive, old farts patriot network. Okay? And these are people that believe negative things, and they believe things that, like, Well, jury nullifications can be overturned by judges, and they are overturned all the time. Well, that's total baloney, because I have never found a case where a jury nullification was summarily overthrown by a judge. Now, there are things that judges do to trick a jury into going back into the deliberation room and succumbing to a bluff that the judge has just run on them and changing the verdict. But judges do not overturn jury nullifications. And if a juror will comport himself with reasonable dignity, he's not going to get any trouble with the judge. And there's other things that people say about jury nullification. There's too many people to educate. It's impossible. We can't do it. There's nothing we can do. You know where I'm going here? You ever listen to talk radio and you hear the whiny people come on? Wah, 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 wah. There's nothing we can do. There's nothing we can do. And when somebody comes along and says, well, we have a powerful tool that we have, that violates some conservatives' essentially religion that there's nothing we can do. Jury nullification is one of the greatest antidotes to conservative apathy and inaction that there is. When you learn about jury nullification, when you really learn about it, and watching 30 minutes or an hour of video is not enough. You need to look into it. You need to have some confidence right in here, and some competence in being able to deliver it. But when you learn about it, there is going to become a shift in your attitude in the relationship between you and the government, the relationship between you and the legislature or the National Congress, a shift in your attitude in the relationship between you and police officers. By the way, I'm not advocating that people disobey police officers and give them a bunch of crap. The police officers are the relative innocents here. The people that are the criminals are the judges and the prosecutors and the bureaucrats. Those are the people that are the real criminals, that are perpetuating, ramming bad laws down the people's throat. And those bad laws almost all of them can be remedied by jury nullification, smacking them. It is a psychological punch in the gut for a cop. I've talked to him. Even when I was on the side of the prosecution and the guy that was the arresting officer got beat, it really ruined his day. And this was not a jury nullification case. It's just cops don't like to lose. Cops don't like to go into a courtroom and give their testimony, and then the defendant is found not guilty. The jury just called the cop a liar. That's essentially what they just called the cop.
I can see that being more stigma around it. Why they try to suppress it.
Yeah, they try big time to suppress it. But who's really trying to suppress it? It's not the cops. The cops are the low level.
Okay, Dwight, so what should the motive of the jury be?
The motive of the jury should be to do the right thing and to have the courage to do the right thing. Most of the time when there is a criminal prosecution, it's a real crime. Jury nullification does not even enter into it. If it's a murder, if it's a robbery, if it's a rape, if it's an embezzlement, if it's a petty theft, that would be a misdemeanor. But jury nullification doesn't enter into it. So what the jury should be in a case like that, he needs to be awake and he needs to pay attention and he needs to come to a conclusion of whether or not the prosecution has proved their case beyond a reasonable doubt, as they say on TV. Do you believe beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant did the deed? Now, if you believe the defendant did the deed, but you believe that the law sucks, okay, now we're in the territory of jury nullification. And by the way, there is another false thing that some patriots believe. They believe that the jury decides whether or not a law is constitutional or not. No. The jury doesn't decide whether a law is constitutional or not. Now, some of you may be going, oh my God, that guy's lying, that guy's lying. No, I'm not lying. The jury is in fact above the Constitution. We, the people, are above the Constitution. Who existed first? Was it the people or was it the Constitution? The government is below the Constitution, but the people are above it because we preceded it. So, what the jury decides is what I just said. The vulgar teenage term, the law sucks. The law is a bad law. The law can be a constitutional law and it still gets jury nullified until it's obliterated. And I have 1 million pieces of evidence to prove that. And that is what I've already mentioned, the prohibition of alcohol. Prohibition of alcohol was under a constitutional amendment. And the old hands in government told the anti-saloon, the anti-liquor people, what you're talking about here is an unconstitutional law to make laws against drinking, make laws against alcohol. So you've got to go get a constitutional amendment. All the prohibition laws were under the 18th Amendment. That amendment was passed specifically to make it constitutional to ban alcohol. Because the good people that were behind prohibition believed in their heart, and God bless them, they believed that the root of all evil in society was liquor, was drunkenness, the cause of every abused and neglected wife, child, the cause of every man that was screwing up his life was because he was a drunk. Well, we know that's not true, but there was some evidence to it. And we also know in hindsight about prohibition is that it caused more problems than it created. So that's why I think it's called the noble failure by some people. But the point here is that it was constitutional, but it was also bad. Just because something is in the Constitution, especially an amendment like the 18th Amendment, it could still be nullified by a jury.
Okay, so what is the point of us doing a video on jury nullification? What do you feel is the call to action here? What's the point of all this?
This is your greatest power as a citizen. Jury nullification is your second greatest power as a citizen. Your number one greatest power as a citizen is if you sit on a grand jury. Jury nullification is a defensive weapon against government tyranny, but it is a powerful, powerful counterpunch that judges and prosecutors don't want to suffer. So it is your greatest power, and the reason we're making this video is that we already have the right and the power and the duty to vote our conscience on a jury. We already have it. In the case of the grand jury, a couple of laws have to be changed to put it back to the way it was before the lawyers stole it from us in the late 1800s. In Idaho, the sheriff used to convene the grand jury, and the grand jurors ran the grand jury. And the prosecutor did what the grand jurors told him to do. Subpoena this guy, subpoena these records, these documents, and subpoena this guy and this guy and this guy and bring them before us. We're going to look into something. And if they looked into it and they found like there was a crime happening or had happened, they can indict somebody. And then the petit jury, the jury that prosecuted people, would take over. So what you need to do is learn more about this, your greatest power. You need to establish two things within you. You need to establish within you confidence that what I'm saying is true. And you're not going to get that by listening or watching a video. You need to read some documents. You need to read the history of jury nullification. You need to read the quotations on jury nullification. You need to read it from multiple sources. You need to read some articles. You could go on the internet and do a search. Do not use Google. It is evil. Use the DuckDuckGo search engine or any better one that you know about. And you could search for jury nullification in gun laws. You could search for jury nullification in health or vitamin laws, because there is a great suppression of natural healing that happens, and jury nullifications are the remedy. They are a defensive remedy, but again, it's a very powerful psychological punch in the face to, in this case, not just the judges and the prosecutors, but the entire pharmaceutical industry. And the only thing that is going to, in my opinion, the only thing that is going to transform this country at the level of health, this constant arguing about how much health care you're giving, is just total folly. If the health care that you are getting is pharmaceutical drugs that you are taking, you're not improving your health. But that would be getting into another subject that you and I might want to talk about sometime. So it is important for the people to understand it. It is important for you to build your confidence and competence. What do I mean by competence? Your ability to talk about it. For example, when you're on a jury, if you're on a jury, your ability to talk to the other jurors. And also your ability to talk to your neighbors and tell them about this power. What you need to do is to tell other people. Educate yourself and then tell other people. When we pass a certain percentage of the American people that understand this right and power that we have, when we pass this, I call it a critical mass. Everybody knows the term critical mass or critical percent. I don't know if the critical percent is 25% or 50%, but I think it's somewhere in that region. And ideally what we want to have is where 100% of the people understand this. Whether they ever get on a jury or not, when people understand the power of jury nullification, a transformation happens within them regarding their attitude about government, their attitude about their relationship with the government, with the bureaucrats. And that will happen when they have a knowledge of jury nullification and they have confidence in what they believe. That will happen. And that is beneficial for our country. The reason that so many people are dropped out of public life, and the only thing they do is they go down and vote every 2 years. Voting doesn't even deflect the needle on the meter of citizenship. Not even nothing, especially when they're stealing your vote, when there's vote fraud everywhere. But even if there isn't vote fraud, voting is nothing. We all need to do a lot more than vote. You need to become an expert on your issue, and you need to get out there and get involved. And it would be really good if you helped to take us to a state of critical mass. We live in the state of Idaho. If in Idaho, if we went to supercritical mass here in Idaho, we would have what I call a jury revolution happening. And what does that mean? That means that there would be jury nullifications that would be popping like popcorn. And what would happen is the courthouses in this state, or any state where this would happen, the courthouses would be paralyzed. The court docket would be jammed with people basically going, I want some of this. I'm going to go out and I'm going to break this damn law that I hate and dare them to prosecute me. And when the courthouse docket gets jammed, here's what happens in the courtrooms. The judge's gavel goes down and he goes, case dismissed. Case dismissed. Now that would be the end stages of killing a particular kind of law. But this is a kind of thing that would bring up so much feelings of exultation in the people that they realize they have done this. And all we need to do is educate each other. Educate each other about this power.